I thank you for the honour of inviting me to deliver a plenary address in this historic symposium marking 100 years of Rotary in Australia and New Zealand. I'm delighted that this symposium celebrates and extends Rotary's commitment since its beginning to promote world peace. I too want to acknowledge that I speak to you from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, pay my respects to their elders and express my gratitude for their continuing custodianship of lands and waters which enriches all of us here. The title of my talk is a sharp one. Leaders of the world, how can we eliminate nuclear weapons before they are used again? It encapsulates the reality that the most destructive of all weapons will, as night follows day, be used again unless we eliminate them first. It highlights the gulf in leadership missing in action on this paramount issue and hints to the reality that in the final analysis it is governments that must be compelled to act to eliminate nuclear weapons. This historic responsibility is confined not to the leaders of the 9 nuclear-armed nations, but to the leaders of all nations, all of us beneath the nuclear sword of Damocles, and all with the moral and legal responsibility to act against this common existential danger. Arundhati Roy so eloquently wrote, "The nuclear bomb is the most anti-democratic, anti-human, outright evil thing that man has ever made. If you're religious, then remember that this bomb is man's challenge to God. It's worded quite simply. We have the power to destroy everything that you have created. If you're not religious, then look at it this way. This world of ours is 4,600 million years old. It could end in an afternoon." Let me highlight as starting points some salient aspects of our globalised predicament. As practical business and professional people acting in the world, people of Rotary understand the importance of truth and evidence, that looking realities, however difficult, squarely in the eye, is the first step to changing them for the better. Nuclear weapons are both bigger explosives and also do things that no other weapon does. Create radiation and radioactive fallout, a powerful electromagnetic pulse, and ignite huge climate-changing fires. They really should not be called weapons. Under international law accepted by all states, the effects of weapons must be able to be confined in space and time. Weapons must be able to spare civilians, the rule of distinction, and civilian objects must not cause superfluous injury or unnecessary suffering. Their effects must be proportionate to a legitimate military objective. Indiscriminate attacks are prohibited. Weapons must not cause widespread, long-term and severe damage to the environment. The effects of nuclear weapons are not compatible with any of these fundamental norms required of civilised nations. They are indeed too big and too blunt, too persistent and indiscriminate, too self-defeating in their effects to be militarily useful. Currently, there are over 13,400 nuclear weapons, 91% of them in Russian and US hands. Almost 4,000 are actively deployed. 1,800 stand ready to be launched within a few minutes of a decision to do so. The World Health Organization has stated, nuclear weapons constitute the greatest immediate threat to the health and welfare of humankind. And international health and humanitarian agencies like the Red Cross Red Crescent movement are unequivocal that no capacity to respond meaningfully to the effects of even a single nuclear detonation over a city is feasible. The imperative for prevention is a foundation of public health, more so for things we cannot treat. The most important new evidence about the effects of nuclear war relates to impacts on climate and food production. Nuclear weapons are extremely efficient at igniting over large areas everything that will burn. In Hiroshima, 13 square kilometres of the city burnt to the ground. The fires released 1,000 times as much energy as the nuclear explosion itself. the largest multi-megaton nuclear warhead currently deployed would ignite mass fires that would burn 1,600 square kilometres in a firestorm over 800 degrees Celsius, within which all oxygen would be consumed and every living thing would die. A nuclear war between India and Pakistan using 250 relatively small nuclear weapons, less than 2% of the world's total and less than 1% of their explosive yield, depending on the size of the weapons, would loft between 16 and 36 million tonnes of black smoke high into the stratosphere. There it would heat, stabilise, spread worldwide and destroy stratospheric ozone. This blanket of smoke would cool, darken and dry the earth beneath for over a decade. Within days, global temperatures would plummet between 3 and 8 degrees, conditions last occurring during the last ice age 20,000 years ago. Agriculture would be decimated around the globe and upwards of 2 billion people condemned to starve to death. The grim reality is that these are not weapons in any ordinary sense. There could be no winners in a nuclear war. Everyone would lose. Once the threshold of nuclear use is crossed, the likelihood of rapid nuclear escalation is high. The reality of nuclear weapons is not mutually assured destruction, but self-assured destruction from what are essentially global suicide bombs. Could nuclear war actually happen? Unfortunately, most signs point in the wrong direction, and the risk of nuclear war is widely assessed to be as great as it ever was and growing. The doomsday clock set annually through careful deliberations by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists this year was kept at 100 seconds to midnight, further forward than it has ever been. It was moved there last year with the assessment that, I quote, "the international security situation is now more dangerous than it has ever been, even at the heart of the Cold War." This year their assessment stated, "the potential to stumble into nuclear war, ever present, has grown." The US intelligence community annual assessment of worldwide threats to Congress in 2019 highlighted that in a climate-stressed world with intensifying global instability, the likelihood of armed conflict and the danger of escalation to nuclear war is growing. Over the last decade, we're seeing a number of internationalised armed conflicts with potential for nuclear escalation rapidly grow. Proliferating cyber attacks, as we've seen just this week, put nuclear command and control at risk in myriad new ways. While deterring nuclear attack is the usual claim justification, each nuclear-armed state has plans to use its nuclear weapons to prevail militarily, and leaders in all of them have in recent years made nuclear threats. All 9 nuclear-armed states are not only failing to disarm, but investing gargantuan sums in not just retaining, but modernising their arsenals with new capacities and new weapons, some the world has never seen before, like hypersonic delivery vehicles, and in Russia, nuclear-powered missiles and torpedoes. US nuclear warhead spending is at an all-time record level. Just a few days ago, the Biden administration requested a military budget of $753 billion US, the increase of $12.6 billion from last year, being more than the total 2021 budget of the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Military spending, even in this time of pandemic and social crisis, accounts for half of total discretionary US government spending. Refurbishment of the whole nuclear weapons complex in the US over the next 30 years is projected to consume $2 trillion US. In recent weeks, the United Kingdom has reversed a modest decline in its nuclear arsenal, announcing a 40% increase. As the United Nations Secretary-General has noted, this is in clear contravention of the United Kingdom's obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. It is painfully clear that none of the 9 nuclear-armed states are now in any way serious about eliminating their nuclear arsenals. Meanwhile, the global stockpile of highly enriched uranium and plutonium, the 2 materials which put the nuclear in nuclear weapons, is enough to build over 220,000 nuclear weapons. An effective regime to secure, cease production of, and where possible eliminate these materials is nowhere in sight. What tools do we have available to secure the decisive progress we so desperately need in the face of this formidable juggernaut taking us in the wrong direction? We should draw on the determination of the collective effort to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war that, with Rotary in the room, launched the United Nations in 1946. The very first resolution of the United Nations General Assembly on the 24th of January 1946 called for the elimination from national armaments of atomic weapons. The NPT, with 192 states parties, requires all its member states in good faith to negotiate nuclear disarmament. The International Court of Justice, the world's highest legal authority, concluded unanimously that all states are obliged not only to negotiate in good faith, but to bring those negotiations leading to nuclear disarmament to a successful conclusion. We should take great heart from the substantial progress made in controlling other indiscriminate and inhumane weapons. No weapon has been controlled without first being prohibited. Codifying in a treaty the unacceptable nature of an inhumane weapon provides the same standard and law for all nations and the basis and motivation for the progressive work towards elimination. At the United Nations in New York at 10:47 a.m. on the 7th of July 2017, in negotiations open to all states, the historic Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was adopted by a vote of 122 to 1, with 1 abstention. The normally formal room full of diplomats and citizens erupted with embraces and tears of joy as humanity and global democracy were asserted to achieve what many had thought impossible. On the 24th of October last year, despite the pandemic, the treaty achieved the 50 ratifications needed for its legal entry into force on the 22nd of January this year. The TPNW was negotiated under a mandate from the United Nations General Assembly. Its depository is the UN Secretary-General. Thus, advancing this treaty is United Nations business. This landmark treaty, the first to comprehensively prohibit the last and worst weapon of mass destruction, is a rock in a dark current, a beacon of light illuminating a path that all nations should walk. It is a moment of truth. The treaty contains the only internationally agreed and treaty-codified framework for the elimination of nuclear weapons and programs, time-bound and verified. There is no other plan. Uniquely in the nuclear field, the treaty is the product of productive collaboration between governments, international organisations, survivors of nuclear use and testing, civil society organisations and experts in what has become known as the Humanitarian Initiative on Nuclear Weapons. I'm proud that the Australian-born International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons became the main civil society partner for governments in achieving the banned treaty. On the eve of the treaty entering into force, international health and humanitarian organisations came together to celebrate, I quote, this essential step towards preventing the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of the use of nuclear weapons and a big win for planetary health. The International Committee of the Red Cross, International Council of Nurses, International Federation of Medical Student Associations, International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, World Federation of Public Health Associations, and the World Medical Associations jointly said, the treaty now becomes part of international law, binding on the states that ratify it. The TPNW establishes a new international legal standard against these most inhumane weapons. Prohibition has demonstrated its efficacy in disarmament. The treaties banning biological and chemical weapons, anti-personnel landmines and cluster munitions have all stigmatised and reduced the deployment and use of these weapons, influencing even nations which haven't joined the respective treaties. The TPNW is already starting to have an effect. We are pleased to see that in response to the TPNW, a growing number of banks, pension funds and insurance companies around the world are divesting from companies that build nuclear weapons. The TPNW provides a vital antidote and our best path forward. Not only does the treaty provide a comprehensive and categorical prohibition of nuclear weapons, it also provides the first internationally agreed framework for a process by which all nations, with and without nuclear weapons, can fulfil their legal obligation to eliminate nuclear weapons. Further, the TPNW commits states parties to provide assistance for the victims of nuclear use and testing and to undertake feasible remediation of environments contaminated by nuclear use and testing. States not yet ready to join the treaty should cooperate in this overdue humanitarian work. The climate crisis and COVID-19 pandemic have brought into sharp relief the critical need for timely international cooperation driven by evidence and expert warnings to safeguard the health and security of people. Nuclear weapons are human-made, so the solution to the threat lies entirely within our hands. Ending nuclear weapons before they end humankind and many other life forms is an urgent health and humanitarian imperative. The treaty is a crucial step towards the eradication of nuclear weapons and a planetary health good of the highest order. We urge all nations to seize the opportunity the treaty offers and sign, ratify and faithfully implement it. That's the end of that statement. As most of you know well, peace work is in Rotary's DNA. An International Rotarians Action Group for Peace is active, including a subcommittee on nuclear weapons education. Recently, Rotarians for a Nuclear Ban was established. I believe a few Rotary clubs have now become ICANN partners. Rotary's key role in bringing the world to the cusp of polio eradication demonstrates the enormous value of the vision, focus, coordinated practical support, collaboration and persistence that Rotarians can deliver. The Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, the world's largest humanitarian organisation, a key custodian of the laws of war, played a crucial role in the humanitarian initiative in the achievement and substance of the Ban Treaty. It will continue to play its part in the implementation and development of the treaty and is mentioned in 3 different places in the treaty's text. I firmly believe that the Rotary movement could play a similarly leading role towards ending the nuclear weapons era. Nothing can justify threatening radioactive incineration of millions of women, children and men. Everything that humanity has built and achieved over the millennia, all of the wondrous living creation we share this good earth with, all of the peaceful gains that our forebears laboured and sacrificed for, all past and future human achievements, with all of us, could be swept away in indiscriminate nuclear violence, irrevocably snuffed out, if we allow nuclear war to erupt. Preventing nuclear war, like preventing uncontrolled global heating, is a historic obligation that we cannot put aside. Whatever else we do, eradicating weapons that pose an existential danger every day they exist ready to be launched needs to be part of our business. We don't have the luxuries of denying or ignoring this problem or of abundant time. We must end nuclear weapons before they end us. It is a precondition for everything else that matters. The Nuclear Weapons Ban Treaty is our best tool to eliminate our worst weapons. Working together, each of us can help our countries free our world of nuclear weapons. Thank you.